Welcome to You, Me, Empathy. Thank you for listening. We would like to remind you that this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Known as just a silly boy with a feely heart. Please consider supporting the show. Check us out on Patreon or simply leave a review on iTunes. Here's your host and creator of the show, Known Wells.
Greetings, feely humans. Welcome to You, Me, Empathy. My name is Noni Shorts. How are you? Thanks for being here. I love you, feely humans. I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy we are here together, embracing vulnerability, embracing empathy, embracing emotional wayfinding as key tenets to our recovery, to our mental health, to connecting with each other, to learning about ourselves, and to just kind of embracing the great wonder that is this beautiful pale blue dot. Today, on episode 73, I talk with my friend Dave Giannini about being okay with not being okay. We explore that and the importance of curiosity in our mental health, Dave's beautiful path toward becoming soon a therapist, and the magic of checking in with people. Before we get to this episode 73, I want to read a couple of new iTunes reviews. Again, if you haven't left a review for You, Me, Empathy in iTunes, please do. It helps out the show. It allows more eyes, more ears on You, Me, Empathy. And of course, you know that the more eyes and ears embracing empathy and vulnerability, the better the world is. So please go leave a review if you haven't. I'm going to read two new reviews that came in recently. This one is from Shaolin Dragon. The title is 21st Century Dialogism. And he, I believe I know who this is, he quotes some unsourced quote here at the top. Quote, "The world is not comprehensible, but it is embraceable through the embracing of one of its beings." End quote. Shaolin Dragon goes on to say, "So said one of the greatest theologians and anthropologists of the 20th century, Martin Buber. And what a wonderful extension of this idea is Known Wells' You, Me, Empathy podcast. Embracing the dialogic approach espoused by Martin Buber, even the title seems to echo the semblance of Buber's most famous work, I and Thou. The podcast serves as a way for us, human beings, to encounter each other and therefore to truly encounter ourselves, to place ourselves on the precipice of the divine, which is in fact that precipice of the human. By engaging with his guests, not as guests, but as thous, the subjective divide of ego isolation is overcome, and in its place a bridge is constructed over which we might cross to better embrace this world which so often overwhelms us. Known allows us, in the 21st century technocratic world, which becomes a manifestation of I, it far too often, to find ourselves through others, and few things are more noble than this. Known allows to remember all real life is meeting." End quote. Thank you, Shaolin Dragon. While I may not understand 75% of what you just said, I appreciate the sentiment, and I appreciate you listening and leaving a thoughtful 5-star review. Thank you for that. That's beautiful. You are very smart, and I care for you. This next review is much shorter. The title is Awesome! 5 stars from St. John's Shivs. The review is, quote, "Would give 6 stars if possible," end quote. I know, right? Why aren't there 6 stars? So thank you, St. John's Shivs. Appreciate the support and the eagerness and the just the positivity there. I love it. Okay. Again, if you want to leave a review for You, Me, Empathy in iTunes, you can. It's easy to do, and I will read them here in the intros. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for listening to this show. Make sure to make sure to follow You, Me, Empathy on Instagram and Twitter at You, Me, Empathy. We have a Facebook group that you can join as well. That's at facebook.com/groups/You, Me, Empathy. And go check it out. I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Again, enjoy. This is episode 73 on being okay with not being okay with Dave Giannini. Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a podcast about exploring the struggles we face in our day-to-day lives as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You, Me, Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our neuroses, our mental illnesses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being human. You, Me, Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today, I am overjoyed to continue this empathy journey with film writer, psychology student, and human with the gooeyest of hearts, even if he won't admit it to me, Dave, Giannini?
Yeah, that's it.
Giannini. Hello, Dave.
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right. How's your day going?
Oh, it's just starting and it's the weekend, so it's pretty good. I'm not looking forward to the days after this, but today's pretty good.
The days after this. I love that sort of generic sort of look at what is Monday through Friday.
Yes.
So I'm excited to catch up with you. It's been a while, and I'm just excited to see how you're doing and see where you are in life and all that loveliness.
Yeah, it's been a long time. It's like once you stop doing a podcast, all your podcast friends just stop talking to you. Like, you're not going to record it? Why would I bother speaking to you?
That is accurate and fair and touche also. Yeah, it's weird. So the listeners should know Dave had a wonderful podcast called Pop Culture Case Study, where he looked at film from a psychology perspective, which is, two of his passions, sort of wrapped up in one. And can people still listen to that via like iTunes and things?
It's gone.
It's gone.
I thought about keeping it up, but then it's like, you're paying the hosting fees
and
for
like
not putting anything
$5 a month
out
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, I still have my Twitter. If you want to talk to me, you can find me, it's fine. But I had a good time with it. I mean, we did like 300 episodes. We had a fair amount of listeners, but it's a hobby. So once it got to feel like too much work, I was just kind of like, I shouldn't be putting myself through this. This shouldn't be making me more upset. This should be fun. And It's not so fun anymore. So let me just put this aside and do some other things.
I think that's first of all, congratulations on like reaching 300 episodes. That's astounding feat. And second of all, I think that's a great lesson we can all take away in that, like, we get caught up in like our passions or side projects or hobby projects or whatever. And we start off doing the thing because it's a joy to us, but I think it's important to question along the way, is this still a joy to me? And you recognize that it was bringing you more stress than was worth it, and you left. I think that's a good lesson.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes it's leaving, sometimes it's altering, like just because something doesn't give you as much joy anymore doesn't mean you necessarily have to give it up entirely, but you can make adjustments and you can figure out a way to make it work so you can still get the good from it without as much of the stress and the bad.
Totally. Well, let's do a little check-in. We always kind of start off the show with a check-in. That's just maybe what we've been doing already, but how's your week been? How are you doing? How are you feeling today?
It's interesting because, it's interesting that I'm on this show now because I feel like, and this sounds very negative, but I don't necessarily mean it to be, as I'm at one of, like, mental health wise, like one of the worst points in my life, but not in a way where it's dangerous. It's just kind of like, oh, things are kind of bad right now. And you have to be aware of that and know that sometimes your own reactions are not indicative of what's actually happening, but the way sometimes your brain can lie to you and poison your life. And you're just kind of like, oh, things are really bad. I have to figure out why that is and figure out what I can do to make things better. So I'm in this very transitional phase in my life. Like in the last year, I've gone through 3 endings of relationships. I've come up against a lot of walls in academia, and so a lot has gone wrong, like, if I'm being really, really honest about it. But I'm also in this process of figuring out exactly who I am on my own, because I've one of those people who's always been in romantic relationships. Like since I turned like 15. Like, I think the longest I've been single is like a month or 2.
Okay.
So this is a big adjustment, like living alone, figuring out what I am really like, the people I want in my life, how I want to run things. So it's definitely been a process, but I think I'm okay this week.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear about all the struggle you've had the last year. It's, but it sounds like you're sort of taking it in and being maybe a little accepting of it.
Yeah, and struggle is necessary.
It is.
If there wasn't anything to struggle, the successes wouldn't mean anything. So,
sure.
I have to keep that in mind too. It's hard to keep in mind when you're going through those struggles because it just feels terrible. But when you look back on it, you're going to be like, oh, this is how I got to where I'm at.
Yeah. As the Buddha says, life is suffering.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm eager to sort of delve into that. I wanted to just give a update on where I'm at emotionally lately, and I'm wondering if you can relate to this, Dave. Lately, so we bought a house this past year, and it's been a bit of a emotional whirlwind. On one hand, feeling very sort of privileged, feeling very grateful and lucky because it truly was a stroke of luck, and then on the other hand, feeling proud, but also like, it's a really old house. And so things are falling apart, right? Like we had leaks in our roof, and, this week the fence blew down, and, it's just like, and
right.
So I'm battling with this thing of being okay with the state of incomplete or broken, right? I have this thing in me, this sort of drive to want to, I think it's anxiety, but I have this anxiety about like, oh, it's not done. I need to fix that right away. And I think that is coming from a place of anxiety. But this week I've been sort of doing a bit more self-talk and just telling myself that it's okay as it is. I can't do it all at once. It will be fixed, eventually. It's not the end of the world. Those are the sort of, that's been my mantra this week.
Right. And I would imagine it's like, it's even more tempting to try to get to that perfection stage where everything is fixed and everything is done, especially if you're someone who struggles mental health wise, especially with anxiety, because like, look, this is something I can control. Yeah. This is something I can fix, where I can't necessarily, like, the way my brain interacts with the world, I can't necessarily fix that by these physical means, by these 2 hands and these tools. Whereas like this fence blowing down, I can control that. I can fix that. But the more you do that, the especially when you own a home, the more overwhelming it becomes, because like, here's the dirty little secret about owning is that there will always be something.
Oh my gosh. It's like it's a never ending onslaught.
Yeah, it's like, pushing that huge stone up that hill, right? It's just like, This is going to go on forever, and I have to take my happiness where I can get it.
Yeah, I love the control sort of perspective, and so much of it is about control, especially when it comes to anxiety, which is a thing that I struggle with for sure. I think that maybe a silver lining to this for me is I had a little silly sort of thought that like, oh, the fence blew down and no sight of a wolf. So a wolf didn't blow it down.
Yeah. See,
so that's a win. That's a silver lining.
Looking at the bright side of things.
Yeah.
Yes. There's no apex predator out there trying to blow down my house. That's good.
Exactly. He's not going to blow it down and bite my face off.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Dave, I always start sort of getting into my guests' stories with, can you give me maybe some seminal moments from your adulthood, from your childhood, just a couple of moments in time that speak to who you are today?
That's a great question. It's so interesting to try to. It's one of those things where it feels easy to do when you're talking about someone else, but when you're talking about yourself, like, oh God, what are the moments? What are these choice points where things changed? I mean, I think, it's interesting. We kind of opened this up and me talking about these relationships ending, and a lot of these moments are within the context of those relationships. Like when I was 15, 16, the first girlfriend I had tried to commit suicide. That was a big moment for me. Not only in relationships, but in kind of the career path I'm taking that I'm eventually going to get to. That was definitely an important moment. Also, another important moment is another partner being addicted to alcohol, and me having to attempt to physically stop him from drinking, which was definitely a powerful, scary moment, especially when you're with a partner who's much more physically imposing than you are. I happened to be with someone who was about 6'3" and about 270 pounds, and it's like, how do I stop this from happening? Because if he really wants this to happen, it's gonna happen.
Yeah. Wow.
This is not something you can stop. So that was definitely a big moment. And then in terms, because it's always important of my familial relationships, there's two that I can think of. One, not necessarily being a moment, but being this kind of continual process of having a parent, my father in this example, who was never really good at emotions, never really good at, like, he's a very loving person. I know that he cares about me, but I can probably count the number of times I've heard those words on my fingers. So that is a process that is a seminal moment of just figuring out who I am as an emotional being, and who do you look up to when the people in your life who you're supposed to look up to for these things don't access that. And that's a really difficult process. And then the other being the end of my relationship with my sister. She had made some decisions in her life that she essentially decided she did not want me a part of her life because of fights we had had and discussions we had had and the people that we were. And that's still a moment that is difficult for me, because that means not only not talking to her, but not talking to my nieces anymore. I haven't seen them for about 6 years. So that's very difficult. And, we live in the age of social media where you can't really avoid seeing people if you have other people who are connected to them. So every once in a while, I'm forced to see how much older my nieces have become, and where my sister is at with her husband and her life, and it's hard, So that's definitely a moment that's still important and still kind of rankles, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot in these moments, Dave. Like, first of all, I'm struck by the sort of familial relationship that. Do you mind sort of going into like why that happened? Like why is it not a thing?
Which thing?
The relationship with your sister.
Yeah. So we had I mean, it's always, when you look back on it, the arguments seem silly and stupid and not important. We never really got along. It was one of those, like, we talk to each other because we are related by blood. We're just very different people, and that's okay. We interact with the world differently. We think about the world differently, and we kind of always have. And then when I was with a specific romantic partner, there was this argument over the holidays and where we would spend time and when this would happen. And my sister was unwilling to budge. And that caused a big fight. And I ended up not seeing my family that Christmas. And then, eventually we kind of came back together and figured things out. And then 2 or 3 years later, when I was with a different partner, kind of a very similar thing happened. And we got in a screaming fight over the phone. And my sister told me that, she's making some changes in her life and only keeping people who she feels like add to her life. And I wasn't included in that. And that was the end of the conversation. And we haven't spoken since. And I think the most upsetting part about that process is not just the loss of that relationship, but also the rest of my family reacting in a way that's kind of like, we're just going to put our heads in the sand and pretend like this isn't happening. I told a parent what happened, and they were just kind of like, well, that couldn't have been the way it went. She wouldn't have said that. I was like, oh, well, all right. Well, I guess I know where I stand, and that's hard. My relationship with both my parents is kind of fraught with a lot of other issues. And we've now gotten to the point where we figured out that, we still want to talk to each other, but we don't want to put the pressure of like, we have to talk to each other all the time because we're related. It's just kind of like when it comes up and when we see each other, then we'll be civil and we'll be good to one another, but we're not going to like force this family unit to be something that it's not, which I think honestly has been really healthy in the long run. Cause then I don't feel all this like excess guilt, and neither do they. It's just like, it's not the end of the world. Not every family is close. Not every family is the nuclear family. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. I think that's a really healthy realization. I agree, because you're right. You can't force that stuff. I feel the same way with my family in a lot of ways. There's some, I think certainly like I'm grounded in a different place than a lot of my family members. And so as a result, there's surface conversations, right? Or there's just not a lot of, there's holidays and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it, is that, you can have a family that really delves, and that can be really healthy, but you can also have a family that if you delve, like there's going to be a lot of anger, a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of sorrow. And it's like, why don't we just keep this shallow? Like the shallow is not a dirty word. It could just be, we could just be civil with one another. If we know we're going to fight about this, why are we going to continue this process where we know someone we supposedly love is just going to get hurt in the end?
Yeah. Have you, since the last time you heard from your sister, have you tried to reach out at all?
Yeah. I tried to reach out 2 different times and heard nothing back. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, she still stands where she stands. And I'm not okay with that, but I have to get okay with that. Like, because you can't control how other people are going to react, or whether they're going to forgive, or whether they're going to move forward. So
as much as we'd like to.
Yeah, you just got to get good with where things are. It doesn't mean you have to be happy that they are where they are, but you do have to get okay with it at some point. Otherwise, it's just going to kind of poison you.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Yeah, it's hard, and I feel your pain. Like I want. Maybe this is me projecting, but like part of me is like. I want to be on your side, Dave, but there's no sides, of course. But there's part of me is like, come on, can't she just get her head out of her ass and sort of look at this with an open heart and understand that like some of these conversations are, like, to use your word, Dave, silly.
Right.
And I think we as humans can get to a place where we sort of tooth and claw hold on to this version of reality, or this whatever happens, because of fear of the path forward, because of discomfort, because of it might result in, some growing, some insights, some personal insights into our own sort of emotional being that we're not ready for yet. But I feel like, this is me projecting, I feel like that's where your sister is.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility. And then I also, like, from my perspective, I start thinking about, like, I've always been one of these people that's like, I've given advice to friends that, like, man, your family is toxic. They're not serving you. Why are you wasting this energy? Why are you doing this? This is just going to hurt you in the end. And then I start thinking about from my perspective and think about, like, if my sister Maria, if she was a friend of mine, would I be putting this much effort into it? Would I be thinking this much about it? Or am I just buying into this notion of like, well, we're family, so we should talk. Whereas if someone pulled exactly what she did and they weren't blood related to me, I probably would have just completely written them off and been like, well, I don't want to hang out with someone who doesn't want to be around me, who thinks that of me. So F you. Like, I don't need this in my life.
Yeah.
So I have to keep that in mind too, that I'm also like, she is holding on to her reality, but I'm also holding on to this notion of like family should matter more than other people.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I think we all do that at some point because we culturally, that's what we're told,
and we're
right?
taught that. Yeah.
We're taught
blood
that.
is thicker than water, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely.
And every movie sort of supports that idea.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like we have to at a certain point understand what's right for us.
Right.
And surround ourselves with people who fill us up and not deplete us. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's really important. It's funny you brought up, the movie thing, because like around the holidays, like movies are terrible for me because it seems like every movie I watch during the holidays, it's all about like families coming back together and isn't this great? We're all sitting around the table, these generations of this family. And I'm like, oh, cool. Something I'll never have. That's awesome. Just what I want to see around Christmas when I'm not spending time with my family.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I feel the same way. What movies do help you during this time? Is it like the opposite? Is it like, I don't know, gangster movies or something? No, I guess gangster movies have a lot of sort of familial pride.
I mean, that's actually, there is, but it's also helpful because like movies like that, like I've actually just been, it's funny you bring that up because I've just been rewatching The Sopranos on Amazon Prime. And like, there are all these very close family bonds, but there's also these close bonds of chosen family. And granted, they do terrible things. They like, rob and murder and, all this stuff. But, it's funny because my dad is a high school teacher and he used to teach a like family values course to his high school students. And one of the movies he'd make them watch was The Godfather.
Oh, wow.
This was a big family who constantly they fought, but they worked together and they always had each other's back. And this is what family values really are. But usually around that time of year, I just usually stick with things that are really, really light.
Yeah.
Like
Elf.
And yeah, well, that might be a little much
or your
for me,
favorite, or your favorite Paddington, right?
Oh yes, of course, yeah. But things that are light, also things that I've seen before. So there's like this comfort, like, oh, I know this will put me in a good mood, so I'm going to go and watch this. So you tend to go to the old standbys. But every Christmas I do watch It's a Wonderful Life because like I'm a human being with a heart, as everyone should watch that movie because it's one of the best movies ever made and really is all about the kind of difference that we make in the world, whether we are connected to the right people or the quote unquote wrong people, we still are making a difference. We make an imprint. And that's important to remember, especially when you feel ostracized from your own family at certain points that like, oh, I do matter. There is an impact because it can start to feel like, oh, I'm just nothing. I've disappeared from the people who are supposed to care about me the most.
Yeah. You need to matter for your own version of that. You need to matter for yourself, not matter within the context of your family.
Exactly.
Yeah. And also, P.S., I haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life, so I'm a terrible human with no heart.
You are, and it's like, oh my God, you would love it. I
know.
I mean, you'd be a crying mess by the end, but so worth it.
Yeah. I'm going to make it happen this year. 2019's the year, Dave.
Okay, I will hold you to this.
Okay. Well, I mean, the listeners hold me to it as well, because I think I mentioned it on Instagram and everyone was like, what? No, this is your movie. You need to watch this. So
how dare you?
Yep. A lot of how dare yous. Yep. So Dave, how are you doing with, with this sort of 2018 year and the struggles in relationships ending and things like that? And specifically, I'm curious about like how you're doing emotionally. You mentioned, sort of dealing with a father who is lovely and loving, but you didn't have that mirror of sort of feely human. You didn't have that mirror of like open sort of emotional love. How are you navigating that on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a journey, it's a process, and I don't think, you talked about, the house and that Sisyphean task that's always going to be there. And I think, dealing with emotions, especially if you're someone who's prone to any kind of mental health issues, it's a lifelong battle.
Yeah.
And, there's going to be ups and downs. And I think it has helped me in the up moments to have this realization that, like, oh, I can get back here. Things are going to be bad again at some point, but I have to be okay with that. And this year in particular has been, I mean, very up and down, very much a roller coaster year. Had the ending of a marriage, the start of a new relationship that I thought was really going to go places. And then that ended, in a pretty rough way, especially because it was a long distance relationship. So there's no way of like having those conversations in person. So very, very up and down. And I feel like I'm more connected with my sorrow this year, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think in some ways, and I think a lot of people in my particular field, because I'm training to be a psychologist, we tend to want to be above emotions in a lot of ways. We are here to help people who are having trouble. So we sometimes want to be the expert and want to have all the answers and be like, well, this is what you do. And then you fix it and everything is fine.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I think there is a lot of people who come into therapy, patients who come into therapy who are there for not necessarily the wrong reasons, but they're not self-motivated to be there, right? They're there because their family says they need help, or they've been told they need help by some authority figure. And then they come in and will be very challenging to us in the way of saying like, well, fix this if you can. So we're expected to, like, within a certain amount of sessions, fix it, fix lifelong problems in 15 sessions or less. And that's, and to do that, you need a fair amount of stability in your own emotion. Yeah. And sometimes you don't have it. And this is why, I don't know if this is even a secret anymore. It used to be, but this is why pretty much all professional therapists have their own therapist, because not only are we taking on the emotions of other people, which is really difficult, but we also have our own stuff to deal with. And I have my own stuff to deal with. And for a long time, I tried to only be the friend who was there for people and who was stable, and just kind of realizing over the past year, like, no, Dave, you've got your own stuff to deal with.
Yeah.
Like you have to, and it's a difficult process because no one wants to be in touch with their sorrow. It's horrible. It's sad. Yeah. It's like by its very nature, like, and we want to avoid pain. So to really delve into it, personally is really difficult, but really necessary, not only in my profession, because it helps me understand my patients, my clients at a deeper level, but just for myself and to be a better person, to be a better human being. Like, I need to understand not only what I'm going through, but maybe some of the reasons underlying why I'm going through it. And it's an important process. So I'm very, but I have to also be careful of not letting it run away with me. Because it's very easy to let your sadness and your sorrow take over. And I say let as if it's a choice. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just like, man, that's the way life is. Sometimes life is terrible and you feel sorrow, but you also have to find a way to balance it and find a way to deal with it in a healthy way so you can still operate in the world. Because if you just sit there and just feel sorrow and you're not feeling any of the joy, then, like, man, it's going to be a rough place to be. Yeah, it's going to be a rough world, and it's hard enough. Things are bad enough without like drowning in that sorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've been there, and it's hard. It's certainly difficult. Sorry, I was distracted for a second. Oh, so recently I was stalking you on Twitter, and recently you said something along the lines of trying to focus on your own happiness over the happiness of others, which is something I deeply relate to as someone who is, a helper by nature. I'm starting to understand better that can be a good thing, but it also can be a really challenging thing. I can sometimes I can get to a point where I feel like I want to be seen as the helper, or I'm like, it's almost like a perception thing, or like maybe I'm becoming emotionally manipulative to a point where I want people to see I'm this helper person, and I'm just relating to that feeling like deeply.
I totally agree. I think it's a weird situation being a helper, and especially being like a helper as a profession,
yeah,
as your job, not just like, because I think every person who gets into the field I'm into started out as like every friend's confidant, like the person they turn to when they're having problems, and the good empathetic listener, and we all have those skills. Otherwise, we wouldn't be interested in that field. But there's also a part of us that when we give and we give and we give, I think there are two things in particular that it makes me think of that are going on. Is one, that we give to everyone but ourselves, and we always want to be there for these other people. And tying back to what I said earlier, because we sometimes put ourselves in the position as the helper, as the person who is stable, then we never get help and we never demand help from our friends. We never get the reciprocation. And that's not even the other people's fault, even though sometimes we sit around and like, well, they could ask me how I'm doing.
Yeah, there's resentment.
That resentment definitely grows, and that's a big deal. And also, when you spend so much time helping other people and going above and beyond the call that most people wouldn't, and then you don't, and then for whatever reason you aren't seen as a helper, or you aren't given gratitude for that, it hurts. Because you know what you're giving. You know how much energy it's taking. And I think in a lot of ways people are naturally kind of selfish. It takes a lot of awareness to not be selfish. A lot of human beings, like, they come first, and that's okay. But it can hurt when you give and give and give, and then you aren't seen as a helper, or you aren't seen as a helper enough in your own mind, and you got to figure out some balance that you're like, okay, it's like the idea of gift giving, right? You shouldn't be giving gifts to get something back. It's not a tit for tat thing. It's not a like, well, I spent this much emotional energy on you this Christmas, and you should spend this much. And and that can and that's just a really ugly cycle that can be really hurtful. So you have to get to a point where you're like, oh, I have to help when I want to, when this is what's right for me, not just because I'm expected to help. And I did that in a lot of areas in my life, just kind of like I did the next expected thing. And it was really eye-opening. I've just started this new friendship with this person, and they've quickly become like my best friend in the world, like just like really connected with this person. And one of the biggest things for me was that every time we talk, every time we text, and, she'll have her own issues and we'll talk about it. And then she'll be like, hey, how are you? And that's like such a big deal. And that was another thing I posted on Twitter, this like thread about friendship and about like how simple it can really be, and just being grateful and checking in with a person and saying, how are you, and meaning it, and not just saying, how are you, and hoping that the person says fine so you can move on to the next conversation or the next thing that's focused on you. But like, it's really funny. It's almost funny how simple it is. Like just being genuine with your friends, just really checking in with them, and not assuming that because they put up a front of everything is fine, because we all do, but not making that assumption that everything really is fine, because it might not be. We all have darkness. We all have these kind of hidden problems that we don't talk about, and we feel like we can't talk about until anybody asks, hey, how are you doing? Because then there's that opening. When we usually don't have that opening, like we have this pressure to be okay. And sometimes we're not okay, and we have to be okay with not being okay.
Indeed. Yeah. No, I have a friend who recently co-founded in 2018. Well, do you know the artist Daniel Johnston? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So he has the sort of, his seminal work is Hi, How Are You? And so they created, they're Austin-based people, and they created the Hi, How Are You project. And it's all about that, exactly what you're saying, asking people genuinely because you want to know and you care about this person. Hi, how are you? Tell me. I think like, It's such a beautiful human thing when we can see people and we can sort of meet them where they are. And it establishes the best, and you're experiencing that now, the best connections and relationships that we humans can have.
Yeah, it's always so nice to be able to be genuine, even when, and sometimes that genuine says, no, I'm doing really well, or I am fine. Everything's stable. I'm doing okay.
Totally.
And sometimes, the how am I doing is much darker, and, and it feels, and even when things are bad and you can tell someone things are bad and they say something back like, hey, I'm here for you, I'm listening, like that can lighten it just enough for me to get through my day. I'm not looking for my friends to like fix me and figure out all my problems, but just to know that there's someone else in the world who knows that I'm struggling is a big, big deal. So it doesn't feel like this secret and like, okay, I can have this front up with 99% of the people in the world, but this person or these 5 people, they know that I'm struggling and they might check in on me today. And that gives me hope that like things are going to get better.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. One of the things I've noticed, and maybe it's just because I've been doing this show for the past year and thinking about it more, but and let me know if you think this is the same, but like I've been noticing just a bit more vulnerability in the world and a bit more sort of willingness to open up and talk about mental health and talk about that pain and that sorrow. Have you noticed that in your sort of world? What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have noticed that in the world in general, and like I have this opinion that I feel like it's because like things are so bad on a global level. Like why would I fear being vulnerable? We are all vulnerable. Like look like just
look
gesture.
President.
Yeah, exactly. Just gesture to everything around us. Like everything is pretty bad. So it's like, okay, so there's this freedom in that, right? That like, oh, everything is bad, including things going on inside my brain. Like, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think in the world of psychology, I'm not sure if I see that change necessarily. And I think there's a bunch of reasons. And I think one of them is, the cost prohibitiveness of therapy. Yeah. And the fact that, and this is something that drives me crazy. It's kind of a big, big pet peeve of mine. And it's a reason that once I finally move into private practice, like I've made this commitment to myself to take on at least 2 or 3 patients pro bono, because it's become therapy has become in general something for the super rich, and usually the people that need it most are the people that have no money. And yes, there are wonderful organizations out there that are helping people of like diverse people, whether you're talking about, different races, different gender identifications, different amounts of money in the bank account. They are out there, but they're all overworked and underfunded. So there's still a lot of people falling through the cracks. Yeah. So it feels like it doesn't feel safe to talk about that stuff. And the other part of it is I think there is, one of the ugly secrets of the psychological field is, and this is, I think, natural. There's this curiosity towards people who are in really bad shape, right? People who are in the hospital setting. Like that's where a lot of therapists want to go because it's interesting and it's different and it's not something you're necessarily prepared for. But there are, literally thousands of people out there who are suffering of quote unquote normal mental health diagnoses. Like, oh, like you'll hear this all the time when you talk to people in the field. Oh, it's just depression. It's just anxiety because it's not sexy. It's not schizophrenia. It's not, it's not a personality disorder. It's like, it's something we could treat. I guess we can do that. So there's this
so
weird,
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's like that in any science, right? Like if you went to the top surgeon in the world and you're like, hey, you get to do an appendectomy today. They'd be like, oh, all right, I guess I can do that. Right. It's not an exciting thing to do. So it's weird to be a part of that world and also a part of the world that is also suffering from mental health issues. So I kind of see both sides of it and I get why they'd be more excited about these other, more exciting things. But it's also like, man, depression is a killer, literally. Yep. Like people die from this. This is something we should be excited to treat, because not only is it really drastic, but it's also something that has pretty good data on our ability to fix it.
Right.
Our ability to treat it is pretty good. Whereas some of these other, like, you look at personality disorders and it's like, well, maybe, but it's the percentages aren't nearly as good as something like depression or generalized anxiety.
It's fascinating because I had a guest on recently, Aaron Smith, and we were talking about his perspective as being, he's not in the psychology field like you are, but his perspective, and I agreed with him, was just in terms of the social sort of conversation around mental health. His perspective was that depression, anxiety, those things are safe. Those things are easier to talk about socially. And things like schizophrenia, which my brother's schizophrenic, those are the ones that are maybe a little scary and a bit more off limits because, we don't understand them, as a layman,
Right. Yeah, I think socially that's definitely true. And I think some of the fault lies in our media, like our pop culture. Because anytime you hear or see something about someone who's schizophrenic, it's always about violence.
Yeah.
And, people who are schizophrenic, it has been shown through many, many studies that they are much more likely to hurt themselves than other people. You really have very little to fear from someone who's schizophrenic. But we've seen all the movies with people hearing voices and seeing and hearing hallucinations, and we're just like, oh, that's terrifying. Like, oh, they must be really bad off. So you never want to talk about that. And I totally get that perspective. And I think socially, depression and anxiety are more acceptable to talk about, which is, I think it's mostly good. But I think the only bad side of that is that, and this is another big pet peeve of mine, is that these psychological terms have become part of the cultural lexicon, and people use them incorrectly all the time. Depression is not feeling sad.
Right.
We all feel sad. It's okay to feel sad. Depression is when you are so sad that you are non-functional, that you can't go about your day, that you can't, many people who are clinically depressed cannot seem to get out of bed.
It's a state of helplessness. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, anxiety is not feeling nervous. Anxiety is very, very different. And some level, and like I spend actually a lot of my time with patients, with education, what we call psychoeducation, as we go through like what these things actually mean, because it's really important, especially with anxiety, because there is a certain amount of anxiety which is actually very healthy. Because if you had no anxiety about anything, we usually the story we use is like, think about it when you were in school and you were taking a test. Okay. If you took a test and you felt no pressure, no anxiety, you would probably fail that test because you wouldn't care. There'd be nothing propelling you forward.
Right.
If you felt so much anxiety that your hand was shaking and you couldn't pick up your pen, you would also fail because you couldn't even write down the answers or think clearly enough to access them. But if you fall like right in that sweet spot in the middle where that anxiety propels you to study and propels you to think deeper, then you're actually going to do really well. So that anxiety is actually a good thing. And if someone has clinical levels of anxiety, then it's just like, oh, this is so much that you're non-functional, that you can't function in a normal way in the world. But we tend to use these terms of like, oh, I have a job interview tomorrow. I have so much anxiety, or I have anxiety. Like, no, you're nervous.
Yeah.
And that's good. It means you care. And that's a lot of time I spent with patients saying like, actually, you feeling this means that you give a damn. And that's great. You should care. These are things that are important to you. But let's find a way to process that anxiety and funnel it into a way that's productive instead of just feeling that anxiety and not being able to do anything with it.
Yeah. So it's really, about education, at least on the social level.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's so, so important. And it's a tough balance because there is both a social and a personal stigma when it comes to mental health, when it comes to diagnosis. But there's two sides of it, right? Is like, one, it could feel really stigmatizing to be like, oh, you have this.
Yeah.
But on the other side, it's like, hey, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
There are other people that have this. I'm not a freak. I'm not, there is a good percentage of people that are experiencing this, and there's treatments for it, and there's something I can do about it. So there's kind of two sides of that same coin. And I think that what really helps is that education piece of just like, this is what you're dealing with, and this is how we can help you operate in the world in a better way, instead of like, you have this, good luck. And sometimes when you talk to doctors, that's what it can feel like. It's
Totally.
like, you have this illness, here's these pills, get out of my office. Whereas in the field of psychology, it's like, okay, let's talk through why you're feeling this way and what's going on and what I can do to help you get to a better place. And it's more collaborative than it is like, here, take this thing and get out of my office.
Yeah, there really is a lot of fear and uncertainty, right? And once we are able, like, I know for me, like, the more knowledge I have, the more I can be curious about my depression and learn more about it. Sometimes or most of the time, the easier it is, because I know I'm learning about my triggers. I'm learning about how depression works on the neuroscience level. Right. That the more I just firmly believe, just broadly, the more education we have as just laymen, the better we are, the better we will be.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it forces us a little bit to be analytical about an emotional experience, which is a really difficult thing to kind of wrap your head around. But once you can do that, then you start gaining some skills that you can kind of combat all this negativity with and figure out a way to, like I said, to kind of operate in this world, even when things are bad. It's like, oh, this is something, again, we go back to control. This is something I can exercise some amount of control over. It's never going to be like, oh, I'm going to snap my fingers and everything's fine. But you can kind of look at it from the outside a little bit and be like, oh, I've been through this before. This is what's happening. Let me figure out how to get through this. And it's not about making it disappear. It's about, okay, the only way out is through, right? Like, I'm feeling this is real, and I have to find a way to move through it. And that is a lot of what therapy is about. And, some people come in and they want that quick fix. And, the brain is the most complicated thing in the entire world. We don't have quick fixes. Any therapist who tells you like, oh, we're going to fix you in a couple weeks, they're just lying. It's not correct. That's not how people work. It's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of effort. And when you go into therapy, yes, that hour a week or 2 hours a week, whatever it is, does help. But so much of the work is going to be done in the off hours. Like, that's whenever my patients come back to me, like, oh, thank you so much, you fixed me. I'm like, no, I didn't. Like, I guided you towards this, but you fixed you. Yeah. You did this because, how many hours are there in a week? There's 24 hours in every day. I see you 1 hour a week. In the grand scheme of things, that is nothing. You are doing the work outside, and that is what separates, in a lot of instances, that is what separates success and failure, is the amount of work that people are willing to do outside of the therapy room. Because there's a certain presentation that we all put across when we walk into a therapist's office. It's not something we do on purpose necessarily, but it's just like, we're like, oh, we want to act this certain way. And then when you go hang out with your friends, you go hang out with your family or your coworkers, it's different. And that's not negative. It's just, we act differently in different situations. It's a human condition. So how hard you work outside of that therapy room and how much you take in the skills and use those skills is really what's going to help. It's not like therapists aren't magic. We're not going to be like, oh, well, I'm just going to tell you these 5 things and you'll never feel depressed again. Like, I wish I had that power.
Wouldn't that be grand?
It'd be great. Just snap your fingers and everything is okay.
I mean, I say that, but I say that with like, actually, maybe I wouldn't want that, right? Because there's so much learning, there's so much like insight in that process, in the process of educating, and I think like we talked about it at the top of the show. In the suffering is where we find really the biggest gems of life,
right?
That can sort of take us forward.
And I think you getting to that point is part of that is because you've gone through this process a fair amount. But I'm sure, like, usually when people finally go to therapy, it's not when they first start to feel a little bit sad or a little bit down. It's when, like, I've got nothing left.
Yeah.
I am at my worst. I am desperate. Everything hurts. I just need someone to help. And I'm sure if you asked, when you were at your lowest point, I'm sure if your therapist asked, hey, would you like to learn about all this stuff, or would you just like me to fix it like that? When someone first comes into the therapy office, they just want, relief. Yeah. Just give me some symptom relief. I just don't want to feel this way anymore. But you're right. In the long run, there's so much more growth, and it's so much more healthy to learn these things, not just about the brain in general, but about your brain and about the way you operate in the world and the things that have affected you in your life, and be like, okay, what do I need to avoid? What do I need to fix? What do I need to change? So now you can live, even though you may still have this diagnosis, you can live in a healthy way where you don't feel the intensity of it anymore, and you can just function. Yeah. I'm not a big proponent of using medications for therapy. I think they have their place, but I do think they are very much overprescribed. But for people who are at the end of their rope, sometimes medication can just get you a little bit stable, so you can actually talk about these things without shaking, without breaking down crying, without stopping your life. Yeah. So sometimes that can be really helpful, just if nothing else as this stopgap, because every bit of research out there has said that therapy is much more effective than medication. Like, medication only does so much. Eventually it doesn't have the impact that it once did, because you're still gaining new experiences in the world and being re-triggered about these things over and over again. But if you gain these skills, you gain these coping mechanisms, those can transfer no matter what you're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to take a jump back in time real quick. And, you mentioned earlier that you first started, or maybe it was sort of your moment of sort of clarity in terms of your interest in psychology, that experience you had when you were 15, and losing your girlfriend. Was it your girlfriend or a friend?
Well, she attempted suicide. She didn't complete. So
Gotcha.
But yes.
What I'm curious about that moment. Like, where did that take you emotionally, and what did you see there? Like, I'm curious about, like, experiences like that we have as humans, these traumatic experiences that we either are witness to or experience themselves. Like, what did that do to you?
Well, I think one of the things that was hardest about it is you feel like, especially when you're that young and you're in a relationship, everything feels like it's forever, and everything feels like you're going to be with that person and you're in love and everything is great. And then realizing that there are forces bigger than not only you, but bigger than the relationship that you can't control and you can't fix. And it's just like, no, this person needs help, that I can't provide. So it made me very sad and very frustrated and very upset. But it also made me, as someone who at that point in my life had never, considered anything that drastic, it made me wonder, what could possibly be going on inside this person that I thought I knew maybe better than I actually did.
Yeah.
And that's I think the most important thing for anyone in any helping profession is to be curious, and to always be curious, because the second you think you know everything, the second you think you're the expert is honestly the second you should retire. Like, you should walk away, because then you're not seeing people. It is, psychology in a lot of ways wants to be a hard science, but it's very different. It's different than being a general practitioner as a doctor or being a surgeon. Because like I mentioned the appendectomy earlier, anyone who needs an appendectomy, has appendicitis, there's one thing you do. You open them up, take it out, sew them back up, you're done. Yeah. That's it. But, you can have 100 patients that all have the same diagnosis, and they will all be very different. And it'll always be a different process getting them to a point where they can operate in a better way in the world. So you always have to be curious. You always have to be wondering. You always have to be asking questions. And that is most of what therapy is me asking open-ended questions and letting them talk and getting all this data. And it will be really, and if they're willing to open up, it'll be really rich data, and you'll find out a lot through some very simple questions. So that is one of the things that really spurred in me, is to be that curious. But of course I had my own struggles with mental health after this point, and a lot of stuff tied in with my parents, like not feeling like I was good enough, not feeling like I was smart enough, dropping out of college, working in retail, working in a casino, all these things. So it's been a really long path. But there have been these moments in my life throughout that I was always a helper and always a person who wanted to help my friends and help other people. And it just became like, I ended up going to a career psychologist, right? To figure out like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, I don't want to work in a casino till I'm 80 years old. Like, this is horrible. Like, this is killing my soul to be in this atmosphere. So I need something. And then taking all these tests and figuring out things that I would be good at. And one of them, of course, was being a therapist. And then realizing like, oh shit, I have to get a PhD to really do this right. Like, this is going to be a lot of work for someone who dropped out of college. Like, this is going to take some real effort. But figuring out like, no, this is what I really want to do, because this is something I've always been curious about and always wanted to help in a way that wasn't just like, I'm here to listen, but actually helping people gain those skills. And it makes me looking back, it makes me wonder like, hey, how much better would these people in my life, how much better off would they have been on if they had gotten some actual professional help?
Right.
But I'm old enough now to remember that like hearing the phrase like get some help, get some professional help is a terrible insult. Like, back in the late 80s, early 90s, like you didn't hear about people in therapy.
No.
Like that just, of course it was happening. It was a field that existed and there were plenty of patients, but you immediately just thought like, oh, are you going to go to the mental hospital? Like that was your first thought.
Yeah.
Whereas now, especially living where I live on the West Coast, it's very liberal, very hippy dippy out here. So there's a lot of people in therapy, and some people in therapy without any kind of diagnosis, just to like process their emotions. And I think, and I am one of those people that does believe that absolutely everyone in the world can benefit from therapy. But there are people definitely that need it more.
And that leads me into like what we were talking about before. What I wanted to ask you about is like the structure of like mental health, the field of mental health and psychology right now. You mentioned before how it's maybe a little backwards, and people, and the people who have clinical depression are maybe underseen, or that's less of a focus because people are curious about the more sort of bizarre sort of disorders that are happening and things like that, which is natural. Of course, like McSteamy is not going to do a heart pressure check, blood pressure check.
Exactly.
So like how does that change? Like obviously that's a huge question, and it's probably out of your control, but is there anything that you can do to start reversing that?
Yeah, of course, it's out of my control in some ways, but not in others. I think if we have enough people who are willing to do some pro bono work, which is something that is in our ethics code, but nobody does, then we can actually start. Because it's one of the things that's in our code of ethics, but it's not there are certain things in the code of ethics like you have to do this, and there's certain things like you should do this, and that goes in the you should do this. You should do some free work for people, because there are a lot of people that need your expertise out there who, are living check to check. Cause you talk to 100 people, I guarantee you at least 90 of them are living check to check right now and spending, $150, $200 a week for therapy. It's just like, no, I need a whole nother paycheck to do that. That's not a possibility. But there are other avenues too. I think something that our entire field has been really bad at is been getting involved in legislation. As far as therapy goes, because there are ways to get more funding and to get things like this covered under insurance, which many insurance carriers do not cover, or they cover the bare minimum. And we have to do the work to kind of get the word out and to talk about, the benefits that we offer, and that we can. And actually, for insurance companies, it's better if people go to therapy. They'll be much less cost in the long run. because because these diagnoses all lead to, like, if you want to break it down monetarily, it's really expensive.
Yeah.
You're talking about people missing work. You're talking about people getting injured, people dying, like families breaking up. I mean, there's a lot of things that it can really affect. And if people actually were able to get help from professionals, that might not be as big of an issue. But I also think one thing that's happening that is slow, but it is happening in this process, is that mental health is starting to get folded into the medical model, which is good and bad, because we tend to, I think in the medical model, we tend to treat people worse. We treat people like, oh, here's your chart, and let's, we have 10 minutes and let's move on. Let's get to the next patient. But the good side of that is that people can get all of their health care under one umbrella, right? They can go to their joint specialist because they have arthritis, and then they can go down the hall because they're feeling depressed, and they could talk to somebody about that. And that happens, and that's starting to happen in a lot of these hospital systems, which of course have a myriad of their own issues that are problematic. Whether you talk about, like, Kaiser recently going on strike because there aren't enough mental health people on staff, so they don't have enough time with people. But I think that's the way our field is into this medical model. And the other good thing about that is the idea of this medical model is that master's level clinicians would take the quote unquote more boring cases, right? The anxiety, the depression, the whatever. And then the PhD level folks would take the really complicated cases that they're the only ones really qualified to handle. You're not going to send a master's level clinician just starting out. You're not going to send them to the person who is schizophrenic and having active hallucinations. Like, that's not something they're necessarily trained to deal with. But you can absolutely put them in the room with someone who, is clinically depressed. Like, that is something that is taught in pretty much every mental health program you're going to get licensed under. So, okay, go there and then save the more complicated cases for the PhD level clinicians. It's the same thing with doctors, right? Someone who is an accomplished brain surgeon, like you said, we're not gonna send them to, like, do the job of checking the person's blood pressure. Like,
right.
If we're going to pay them $800,000 a year, go operate on that brain, please. Earn your money.
Yeah. So, are you saying that it's going to continue to the mental health field sort of pour into the sort of medical field structure? Is that the sort of thing I'm stumbling over my words. Are we going to see more and more of that?
I think so. And I think there's definitely a good and a bad side to that. I think it's good in the ways that I mentioned, but I also think our medical system is broken and fucking terrible. But I don't think that there's so much money wrapped up in it that I don't think it's something that is going to be taken apart and built from the ground up. Because honestly, like, all these things should be covered under a single payer system. Like, this is just the way it should be. But we're in this system where it's like we have, scores of people taking a look at what these people are going through on their chart and being like, oh, we're going to cover this, we're not going to cover that, sorry, figure it out on your own. And that's just a non-empathetic, kind of terrible way of dealing with people who are in legitimate pain. You would never tell a person who tore their ACL or who had a broken leg that, like, oh, sorry, that's not actually going to be covered. We don't think it's bad enough. Like, I went through this when I was looking for therapy through my health insurance. I was with Kaiser at the time, and I made the mistake of telling them that I did not want to kill myself. And they were like, yeah, well, it's not, drastic enough for us to cover this.
Wow. So, that's shitty.
But if I had told them, like, no, I have suicidal ideation, I think about it all the time, I don't think I'm going to do it, but I do think about it, then I could have gotten some covered therapy.
Yeah.
So it's like, we should be looking at, the whole idea of the medical model should be preventative care. Mm-hmm. Because it gets really costly and really rough once things are that bad. Like, I don't want my first appointment, even as a therapist, I wouldn't want my first appointment to be with someone who comes in like, hey, if you don't help me today, I'm going to slit my wrist, I'm going to kill myself. Like, that is a scary thing to walk into for both people in the room.
Yeah.
So why not take care of this, if someone is willing to make the phone calls and willing to come into therapy before they are at that drastic point, that should be rewarded and not punished.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I have a very serious question. In what ways are you like Vera Farmiga's character in The Departed?
Are you asking, have I ever had sex with one of my patients? Is that your...
No, I recall
Yes,
you being vehemently opposed to what she was doing as a therapist in that movie.
Yes, don't invite patients to your house. Don't have sex with your patients. That's that's a big one. That's actually in the ethics code as something you're not allowed to do.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
I mean, but I think, the funny part about that is the fact that that is a rule because there were many, many marriages that started with therapist and patient. Like this happened all the time back in the day. And it just became a point where I'm like, this is not ethically sound. This is not healthy. There's a power differential here. This is not great. So they finally put it down in writing as like, let's not do that.
Let's not do that.
It's
yeah.
not okay. So no, I am dissimilar to Vera Farmiga in many, many ways. Some of them being how she's a therapist in The Departed. But this is the thing when you are trained in anything, it can ruin media for you. Where you're just like that's not how that works. That's terrible. What are you doing? So it's like I have to find a way sometimes to kind of shut that analytical part of my brain off when I watch any movie with a therapist, because I know they're always going to do it wrong. And it's because like if they did it right, it would be boring. Like
so are you telling me it's never been done right in film?
I mean, there are some situations where I've seen it done right. I just mentioned earlier that I'd been rewatching The Sopranos, and I think that show actually did a really good job of showing what therapy can be like. But it's just like, it's just like watching a courtroom drama.
Yeah.
Like a lawyer can't walk up to the stand and shake his finger in the witness's face. They have to stay a certain distance away, and, it's just like, but that's not exciting.
Right.
That's not dramatic.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with therapy. If you watch, therapy can be really interesting for someone who's trained in it, or if you're in the room, you're the one who's the patient. But if you're just watching it, it's literally just people sitting across from one another, one person asking questions and listening. I mean, it's not super exciting. I mean, there are certain therapies that are more exciting. There are exercises you can do, like these 2-chair exercises where you could talk to the person who hurt you, and you can role play. Like there's a lot of stuff going on, but in general, it's not cinematic. It's not something you're gonna let's watch 55 minutes of this. Like, no,
it's me looking at the ceiling a lot and sort of pondering what she's saying.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So where are you now? You had mentioned you are working on your dissertation. Are you close to being a therapist? Like, where are you in your education?
Yeah. So this last year, I moved to the hellscape that was Reno for a year and had an internship, which was the first time I actually got paid to be a therapist. It was peanuts, but I was getting paid to be a therapist.
That's exciting.
That was very exciting. Like, for what? That was good. So now I'm done with that, and the next step is to finish the dissertation, and then I become a postdoctoral fellow, which is basically you work pretty much as an independent therapist. You get paid a little bit less than a licensed psychologist would be, but you have your PhD, and then while you're doing this fellowship, you study for this big, horrible test that I have to take called God, I can't remember what the name of the test is called, but it's essentially the test for licensure. So it tests you on everything from Psych 101 to the most advanced stuff. And once you pass that, then you're licensed, and then you can get a real job. So I'm close. I'm probably about a year away from being an actual therapist. So that'll be exciting. I can actually be a doctor.
That's amazing. I mean, what a journey too. Like, kudos. Like, just knowing you and hearing you talk, Dave, like it warms my heart to know that you'll be a therapist.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, that's honestly, that's also another one of the reasons why I decided to become a therapist, is that I went to a fair amount of bad therapists and a fair amount, and there's, not to like harp on these people, but there are a lot of people in the field that are there for the wrong reasons, and shouldn't be therapists, should probably be in academia, because It takes a certain kind of person to be a therapist. Just like it takes a certain kind of person to be a doctor, it takes a certain kind of person to be an architect. Like there's certain skills and certain things you really need to have. And I think sometimes, and a lot of it also is because, therapists in general deal with a lot, and there's a lot of like, secondhand trauma that goes on, and it's exhausting, and there's a lot of burnout that happens. And when burnout happens, people don't try as hard and they don't do their jobs as well. And that is a big problem within this field. There's a lot of people do this for 5 or 10 years and then they quit because it's just too much, because there's not enough self-care built into these programs. Like you're kind of expected to go through hell and figure it out on your own, which we would never do to a patient. But we end up doing this to patients secondhand because we are not fully focused and we're not giving our all because we are so weighed down by all this stuff that we're taking in. If you literally, I know, and I've done this, and I also know therapists who have done this, where they've literally spent an entire day, like 6 or 7 patients, like listening to nothing but trauma, listening to rape, to murder, to vicious assault, like all these things. And it's impossible not to take some of that in. It's impossible to keep that completely separate, because if you're keeping it completely separate, you're not connected to your patients. You're not feeling what they're feeling. You're not being empathetic. But when you're that empathetic, like, man, that can be hard. And you really need to set some really hard and difficult boundaries for yourself. But a lot of people are, especially helpers, we're actually really bad at that. We're really bad at setting those lines.
I'm nodding along. Yes.
And it's just like, and it becomes something that, it becomes more difficult to function. So then people will shut down a little bit and then not be there for their patients. So that's always been something I've tried to keep in mind, is that, okay, this hour is not for you, Dave. Like, we may be selfish people, but in this hour, this is for them.
Yeah.
You have to be there for them. Not just because like, oh, they're paying this amount, blah, 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 but just like they need help.
Yeah.
Whatever their diagnosis is, even if they don't have a diagnosis, they are here because they are struggling. And it is your job to make them feel like they're not alone in the world. And you have to figure out, okay, what can I do after this session to care for myself? Whether it's doing some meditation, going for a walk, going out after work and having a couple drinks, whatever it is, do something for yourself. Because if you don't, it's so easy to get wrapped up and then to start doing a subpar job.
Yeah. No, I relate so deeply to all of that. Obviously I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a professional. I'm just a silly boy, but, I have these conversations a lot. I run the show, You Me Empathy, and I listen to a lot of trauma, and I hear, and I know I catch myself as that sort of helper person and that very empathetic person. Early on, in last year when this show was getting started, in the first few months, I think I had to have that conversation with myself, because I was taking on too much and it was sort of impacting me. And how can it not, right?
Right.
And so I like you said, I had to find boundaries, healthy boundaries. I had to find, specific self-care that really helped sort of process through that. And so I relate to that a lot. Yeah. So let's start wrapping it up.
Okay.
We always sort of wrap up the show talking about empathy heroes. These are just people in our lives who are just great empaths and good at listening and sort of meeting us where we are and leading with their heart. And so while I give you some time to think on your empathy hero this week, Dave, my empathy hero this week is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez dancing.
Good one.
Yeah. So she's the congresswoman in New York, and the right, decided to release some video of her dancing from when she was in college. And
how dare she enjoy her life in college?
How dare she dance to the Breakfast Club? And it just backfired, and it's delightful to think about, and it's delightful to watch. And she's awesome, and really a leader in progressive values and human rights, and the rights for diverse populations. And so she's great, and she's my empathy hero this week. How about you, Dave?
I'm glad you were able to pick someone in the world of politics. I don't know if I would have been able to do that. That is impressive.
It's
to find someone there who has some empathy.
Needle in a haystack.
Yes, but I think she's a great, great choice. The person I always think of, and of course, I'm inherently selfish, so it always ties back to my own experiences. But I kind of talked about this idea of, not knowing where I was going with college and figuring stuff out. And, the reason I ended up getting into, not the reason I got into, but the reason I had the desire to move into grad school was taking a class from this certain professor. His name was Daniel Bunce. And he is like not only my empathy hero, but just kind of my hero in general. Like he changed my whole worldview. Because I took a course with him that was about humanistic psychology, which is about like kind of unconditional positive regard for your patients and just being there for them, which I think is the most important thing. He's smarter. He's probably forgotten more than I'll ever learn. Like he's got, 2 PhDs, one in psychology, one in philosophy.
Wow.
And it's interesting because when he first went to college at the University of Michigan, he was there on a football scholarship. He was a linebacker, and he got in a motorcycle accident and just kind of destroyed his right knee. And then that is what spurred him on to learn. It's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I got to figure out something. And he started reading philosophy texts. Like he just went to a library and started reading and figured out his passion. And that was like a big thing for me, is like, oh, like you have this judgment of people like, oh, this, this high school athlete who got a scholarship. I'm sure he's just a dumb jock. I'm sure he's a jerk, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But this man is one of the most amazing men I've ever met in my life. And like I actually have a video of him speaking at this event at my school, which I wasn't able to attend, and him talking about why we do what we do. And he's also the person that introduced me to my favorite book in the world, which is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which talk about empathy, talk about, deciding to react in a positive way. I mean, this is a man who is, in concentration camps and is teaching people about how to love and how to live a fuller life. Like if he can get through that, I can get through anything. But Professor Bunce will probably always be my empathy hero and kind of my, kind of a guiding light in my life. Even if we don't see each other very often, he is someone I think of a great deal, and someone who I kind of hold, give some responsibility to the man I am today and the path that I'm on.
That's beautiful. I have goosebumps over here, Dave. Is Professor Bunce still teaching?
Yeah, he's still teaching at Palo Alto University, where I went as an undergrad, and still doing and teaching at De Anza. I actually took classes from him at a community college as well. Still doing his thing and still being amazing. Like
that's great.
Just fantastic. And I think anyone who is passionate about their career, there's always a mentor, there's always a teacher, like someone who just like sparks you. Mm-hmm. And that was me. And it took until I was in my 30s, but I found that spark and kind of it propelled me forward.
That's amazing. I love to hear that. And especially when it's a teacher, Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. Well, Dave, where can people, if you want to share, where can people connect with you and sort of check in with you and see what you're up to?
All right. So there's a couple things. As you mentioned, I do some film writing. I also do some music writing now. I am both a writer and an editor at Talk Film Society and Saint Audio, which is a great music website that's kind of expanded my horizons. Or you can just find me on Twitter. And it's just Dave A. Giannini, and Giannini is spelled Giannini.
Great. Well, thank you, friend. I appreciate. I really enjoyed catching up, and I'm so grateful that you're going to be in this world of psychology. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. And to you listeners, I'm here. You're here. We're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring pale blue dot. We have each other. It's you, me, empathy.
Love come.